Welcome back to another episode of the Lender Podcast. I'm Bryce Matheson, and as always, this episode is brought to you by Lender. Lender is a loan management software tool designed to help you with every aspect of your business, from origination to servicing to payoff. Lender helps you with document generation, helps you with collecting monthly payments, dispersing monthly payments to your investors, taking in new loan applications, giving your borrowers a portal that they can log into, giving your investors a portal that they can log into. Pretty much every aspect of everything that you do inside of your lending business can be done and facilitated through Lender. You can check that out by going to joinlender.com. That's LENDR, joinlender.com. Now, on to the episode.
I don't really have anything scientific to back this up, so this could just all be in my head, but I feel like as of late, there's been a lot of talk, especially in the private lending world, around new construction and whether or not you should or shouldn't do them. I really like doing ground up construction. There's a lot of reasons why. Obviously, we'll get into that in this episode, but I think a lot of private lenders are scared of them, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Now, there's a lot of things that you should know, and there's a proper way to structure these so that you don't have too much exposure on day one. Of course, we'll talk about that as well, but I love ground up construction, and I think it's a really good loan product to offer in addition to just your standard fix and flip as well as your bridge loan type products. The biggest problem is that I see a lot of people who have too much day one exposure. And so listen to this and I'll give you kind of a sample example. So let's say, for example, we have a $100,000 lot purchase. We have a $250,000 construction or build component to it, and the ARV on it's going to be, $500,000 or so. So the total loan amount on that is going to be $350,000. But on day one, your exposure is $100,000, which is not necessarily a bad thing per se, but what is backing that up? All you have right now is a piece of dirt, and that's it. So is the land worth $100,000? And in the event that something happens, I'm taking back a piece of ground that I may or may not want. So the biggest thing really is you just want to make sure that on day one, you don't have too much exposure. And so what this typically looks like for me is I typically like to see the borrower who owns the piece of land free and clear, and that's their down payment and that's their collateral. And borrowers instinctively, they understand this, but for me, if I'm funding the lot purchase and the construction, typically that's kind of a red flag in my mind. There's just a little bit too much risk on day one for me. I want to see a lot more skin in the game for the borrower. Okay, the other thing that I see a lot of is just basically, does the borrower have the expertise to do a ground up construction? Do they have any construction experience? It's hard enough to go in and flip a house, but to do everything from the ground up, does the borrower have any exposure to ground up construction whatsoever? So typically for me, this looks a lot like vetting their experience. Are they a general contractor? Do they have a GC license? Is their license active? Do they have a track record? Do they have experience? Can they show you the past projects that they have recently done or have done in the last year? Even if you have the best project in the world, you have plans, you have permits, everything is laid out, ready to go, execution can kill a really good deal if it's poorly managed and not run properly. Now, in my experience, a borrower typically has to have one of three things to really have a successful construction project from the ground up, and I won't do it unless they have one of these three things. And those things are a really good advantage on the land value. They got the land at a steal of a deal, or they've owned it for quite some time. They bought it for 5 years. It's already paid off, and this is going to be their collateral. The other thing is they may have an advantage with construction costs. Maybe they have a local hookup with a wholesaler who's going to give them pricing on construction materials at cost. That's really, a huge thing. And the last thing is cost of financing. If they have some sort of deal or something that makes the overall cost of the project significantly less. I just want to see that the borrower has some sort of unfair advantage, because if you have some random Joe Schmo off the street who is not a general contractor, who doesn't have access to cheap labor or cheap contractors, or they don't have access to cheap materials or some sort of leg up on the competition, you're basically just going to fund a retail project. And that's kind of a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. The other thing that I see a lot of is lot risk. And what I mean by that is, tell me about this lot. Is it an infill lot or is it raw land? Infill is it's part of a planned subdivision. It's already got utility hookups and it's got streets and it's got drainage. It's a standard, ready to go buildable lot. Versus, is this a development project? Are they buying a huge piece of land? And I want to say huge tracts of land. Is this, is this a lot that they have to carve up, and they have to put in all the city services and the utilities, and they have to put in street, and they have to put in curb and gutter and all these different things? If they don't have the experience, I am not going to fund that project, because that is a huge undertaking and people simply do not have the expertise to back that up. And on top of that, if it's a raw lot, just vacant piece of land with no development whatsoever, it's usually more expensive. And those development projects, again, if you don't have the experience, are going to be way more expensive and incur all these additional costs that most borrowers typically don't even think about in the first place. So in the event of this, I am personally going to go and I'm going to verify the site plan. I'm going to verify the site work. I'm going to go and I'm going to verify the work has been done with the city. I'm going to just make sure that all the ducks in the row, all the utilities there are there, ready to go, and it's a buildable, ready to go lot. Okay, now here's something that a lot of people don't consider. For example, a lot of people will look at just the base LTV and they'll look at the percentage and they will say, okay, cool, this is a 50 LTV. That's incredibly low risk. But what is that measured against? Is this a $50,000 lot or is a $500,000 lot? Because 50% LTV on 50,000 versus 500,000 is vastly different. And a lot of people just take LTV as like the de facto like golden rule that, oh, perfect, this is 50% down LTV. And so it's not the same. There is $25,000 worth of equity versus $250,000 of equity. There's a lot more skin in the game from that particular borrower, and chances are they are not going to default on that. Okay, so I used this example already in the past, but I kind of want to reiterate. There are two main ways to approach new construction deals. And typically I see like a scenario A and a scenario B. For example, in scenario A, a borrower owns a lot free and clear. So for example, say it's $100,000 land value, $250,000 construction. The structure is $250,000 loan, $250,000 construction holdback. Obviously, the land is already owned free and clear. And so for me as a lender, there is 0 day one exposure, which is exactly what I want, because in the event that something happens from the time the loan is issued to when the construction breaks ground, that whole time I have nothing owed from the borrower. And so if they skip town or something disappears or the project doesn't go through or whatever it may be, and things do happen, I promise you, I have 0 exposure, which is exactly what I want. So the borrower funds the early stages, like the foundation and the framing and the things like that. And then I only come in on the back end once those checkpoints are hit to come in and reimburse the borrower as soon as I have inspection, as soon as I have receipts, as soon as I have lien waivers from the contractors that were used. I never front load the funds. The borrower always has to do the work up front first, and then I will reimburse them. Now, another scenario I talked about where I really don't like to provide the funds for the lot plus the build, but it can work as well if, for example, you have a $500,000 lot and a $500,000 build. That's okay because the structure is 50% of the purchase, which is $250,000, and then 100% of the construction, which is $500,000. The total loan amount obviously would be $750,000 with a $500,000 holdback, but my day one exposure is $250,000 on a $1 million project, $1 million ARV, obviously, but my exposure is only at 25%, which I really like those numbers. I like that a lot better. So the borrower, they bring $250,000 down plus all the closing costs, but that gives me huge safety margins just in the event that something bad does happen. Okay, so now the project, once it's like basically under roof, once it's dried in, it pretty much just turns into a regular old like fix and flip loan. For example, they'll go in and they'll get reimbursed after a specific milestone. So they get the drywall done. Cool. I'll reimburse them as long as I have pictures, I have receipts, and I have lien waivers. And then again, they front load that. They pay for the costs up front, and then I come in and reimburse them after I have all of the paperwork and everything is good to go. Also, I don't really use third-party inspections, but typically it's a good idea if you do, at least for like the first few projects until you kind of get your feet wet and you know what you're doing, have a third-party inspector. And on top of that, I really like it because in the event that something happens or the borrower says, why am I not getting reimbursed for this? Like this was already done, blah, blah, blah. You can kind of blame it on the inspector and be like, sorry, the inspector went out, he saw these things and they weren't done. And so, you got to get X, Y, and Z buttoned up before we will reimburse that. Okay, here's a little tip that I will always do, and I don't know if this is really helpful, but for me, I really like it. So a borrower, no matter what, when they come to me for ground up construction, the first thing I ask them always is, why do you not just go to a traditional local bank or a credit union? And I'll ask them that. I'll say, why do you not go to a credit union? Because their construction loans are going to be infinitely cheaper than mine. Always. Why do you want to come to me for ground up construction? And I need a good answer. If it's just simple, like, I just, like, credit, whatever, like, give me something real. For example, if it's a general contractor and they say, I don't have a standard W-2, it is a nightmare going through a bank. I realize I'm going to pay more through you, but the ease of getting draws and making sure that everything goes smoothly and on time and making sure that I can pay my subs and all these things on time, that to me is worth the little additional cost. And to me, that says, yep, okay, great, let's do it. If they don't have a good reason and it's just poor credit and that's it, and they just can't get approved anywhere else, I probably won't do that. And I'm going to read into a little more and say, are you even qualified to do a ground up construction? We had a borrower come to us and he said, I like to typically use banks, but this last experience was just awful. Like, they were nitpicking me on all these tiny little items, and I need to pay my subs and I need to get through this project. And so I'm not going to do that again. I just want to go private money. And again, I realize it'll cost more. That's okay. We're good with that as well. The nice thing too is, obviously, as private lenders, like, we have quick decisions. We can be flexible, but still keep things safe and make sure that we're doing things within our parameters and our guidelines. Now, one thing that I always do, and some people disagree with this, but no matter what loan I'm doing, whether it's a fix and flip, ground up construction, I charge Dutch. And if you're not familiar, there's really two methodologies. There's Dutch versus non-Dutch. And this is just the way that interest accrues on your loan. So say, for example, you're doing a $300,000 component, or construction component. If you're doing non-Dutch, the borrower is only going to pay interest on the funds that are drawn. So say for the first 30 days, they don't draw on that construction loan at all. They will pay $0 in interest. And then if they take a $50,000 draw request out of their $300,000, they're only paying interest on that first $50,000. And so their monthly payments will step up in line with that $50,000. This is how most banks and credit unions do it. It's just they do non-Dutch, and that's just kind of the way things work. With private lending, I only charge Dutch, because if I have to take that $300,000 out of my budget and I cannot lend that out to anybody else, you sure as hell are going to pay interest on it. And yeah, it'll cost you a little bit more, but you can guarantee you will know that those funds are there and they're not going to be given to anybody else. So again, it costs more. It really does. But again, there's a reason why someone is coming to you in the first place for private funds at all. Now, one thing I have done to kind of combat this is I've had borrowers who have come to me and said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll just go with a traditional bank. And that's okay. They can go elsewhere. I truly do not give a shit. They can go wherever they want. But one thing that I do use to overcome that is I say, realistically, honestly, we're not talking about that much, because you're going to take your first draw or two within that first 30 days. And so you're going to start drawing down that line pretty quickly. And so in the grand scheme of things, you may pay a couple $1,000s more over the life of the loan. Is that worth, the ease of construction? In my mind, yeah, I think so. And also you could say, like, well, if the bank is taking so long for what is the interest on that balance while they're just kind of sitting there twiddling their thumbs and are waiting for approval and to go through underwriting and all. It's just, again, it's something that I have used and has been an overcome for a fear for other people who are like, you know what, I don't want to pay that. It's really not that much. When you look at the math and how that kind of steps up over time, you're maybe saving $5,000. $2,500, $3,500 over the life of the loan. So in the grand scheme, things is really not that big of a deal. Also, there's another reason that I really like this. And obviously, selfishly, I make more money, of course. But what's really cool is I can take those funds that have not been drawn yet and I put them in a high yield savings account. And so on top of the note rate that I'm already making on the loan, I'm also earning 4% or 3.5% on that money, which, is not a ton again, but obviously it's still, everything adds up. Now, this is something that I kind of even hesitate to mention. I truly do not recommend this, but I have been guilty of this in the past. Sometimes what I like to do is I can issue a ground up construction loan even if I don't have the funds fully available. And again, I know some people probably cringe when I say this. I have issued loans even when I don't have the funds, because I know, and I'm not saying like, I think maybe, like, I'm highly confident. I know that by the time that money needs to be there, it will be there, because I know I have other loans paying off. I really cringe to even say this, because I know someone's going to take this out of context and they're going to say, well, Bryce said, no, that's not what I'm saying. There have been times when I have been over leveraged and I know that a loan is paying off next Friday with certainty. I have issued a new construction loan and then I've waited for those funds to come back. But I've also had backup plans. I've had lines of credit. I've had other things like that I didn't necessarily want to pull from in the event that I had to, but I know that I could if I needed to. So I like that flexibility where I can over leverage myself just ever so slightly, just because I can make a little bit more interest if I'm highly confident that everything will work out just fine. So take that with a grain of salt. Okay, so you may just be asking, like, why do borrowers even accept these terms in the first place? And in my opinion, investors, and when I say investors, I mean like the borrowers, like the real estate investor who's building the project, they prefer certainty over bureaucracy. They just don't have to deal with all the red tape and the jumping through the hoops and, waiting for this and doing for that and waiting for this guy to come out and take pictures and approve the thing with the bank. But then he got delayed because it's a holiday, so the bank is closed. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you don't have to deal with all that. You also have to be very careful with borrowers who try to game the system, because there are some who will say, oh, well, I thought you were a no money down lender, and there are all these different things. I don't know, have them go to a traditional bank. Are they going to get a no money down loan on new construction too? I don't think so. I mean, banks are not stupid. Like, they're going to look at the project, they're going to underwrite it, and they're going to look at the numbers and make sure that everything works out too. So I would be wary if somebody was like, well, I'm expecting to bring nothing down to the table. Sorry, go somewhere else. That's not for us. Okay, so why does this method even matter? Well, it reduces risk. So for example, you've got 0 day one exposure, means 0 loss potential pre-construction, which we are a huge component of. Permitting and like groundwork risks remain, but they're manageable. You're still going to have that in other projects. But one thing that I really do like about new construction is it can be a lot less risky than a traditional fix and flip. I've got a good buddy who is a general contractor, and he only does ground up construction. And it's funny because we've chatted before, and he said, I can't believe you did so many flips in the past, because ground up construction, new construction, is just so much better. It is a brand new clean slate. Whereas with a fix and flip, you still have to use all of the different trades. You have, an electrician and plumber and HVAC and a roofer and all these different things, but it's just messy because you could open up these walls and you have no idea what you might be getting into, or you may have foundation issues. And for ground up construction, it's just a clean blank slate. Like, you've got your foundation, then you frame it, then you put the roof, and then you do the electrical, then you do the plumbing and the HVAC. It is fairly cut and dry and straightforward. So I really like that. There's just not as many surprises inside old walls. I like that for sure. The other thing that's also kind of nice with new construction is, yes, it's a blank canvas in the sense that it's all new work, and so you don't have that many surprises. But in my opinion, the costs are also easier to predict. Again, you may not know what you're getting into when you tear into this wall and you have, oh, shoot, now I've got this foundation issue that I have to deal with that I couldn't see before. Whereas this is all new concrete. We just did brand new footings and brand new this and brand new that, and there's really no surprises. That's not to say that something can't go wrong with new construction, but in my opinion, it goes wrong significantly less. So in summation, I would say always, always, always verify that the borrower has experience and liquidity. Always. Always, always, always. I am not going to let a brand new borrower who has never done anything in real estate whatsoever do a new construction project. At a minimum, I would want to see that they are partnering with somebody, or they have signed with a GC who is doing that, which in that event, like, you probably don't even need the brand new borrower anyway, and the GC can just handle everything. So we always, always, always require meaningful cash in the deal, whether that's collateral as the land, as equity, or a significant down payment. We always delay the first draw until the framing roofing stage. Always, 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 always. I just want to see that, like, they have skin in the game. And we basically just treat it like an oversized rehab with clear enforceable draw rules. Like, these are the predefined, this is when you will take draws, and this is when you'll get reimbursed. So in total, you make the rules, you control the disbursement and the pace, but I promise you, if you do it the right way, they can be very lucrative and super, super profitable. But also, you can lose your shirt if you do it the wrong way and you're over leveraged too much, too highly in the beginning of the loan. So like I said, I love ground up construction. I really do. I like doing a lot of them. I would say they're an overwhelming majority of our portfolio right now, probably 25%, but I really enjoy it. And I like seeing the pictures of the before and after, and it's a lot cleaner. I really like it. So if you're a private lender and you haven't done new construction before, I wouldn't shy away from it. It's not necessarily scary. You just have to make sure that you do things the right way and organize it so that you don't lose your shirt. So that is it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening. As always, if you have questions or you like these episodes, please reach out to me and tell us what you liked. Tell us what you want to hear more about, and we'll catch you in next week's episode. Thanks for listening.